I'm Joseph Smarr. I'm from Plaxo. I'm really happy to be here. This is my second Google I/O, and no better way to sort of benchmark how much progress we've made in the last year, which is mainly what I want to share with you guys. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the session if you have. There's microphones, but I think if I've timed this right, there should be plenty of time at the end for Q&A too. So really hope if you have questions, you'll get a chance to ask them. And going to try to do a lot of demos here. I know the Wi-Fi internet's been a little bit flaky, so demos in a live setting are always a little bit masochistic to start with, but hopefully that'll all work, because I wanted you to see how much of this stuff is really real and not just theoretical. This little link down here, if you can see, is there's a Google moderator, apparently, that you can submit questions live as well during this presentation. So ISGDHJQS, that's as merciful as I could make it for transmission over the air. So I thought I'd start by just briefly talking about what I said last year to kind of contrast it from where we are today. So I gave a talk last year at Google I/O called OpenSocial Open ID and OAuth Oh My, and it was sort of starting to say, hey, there's this groundswell of interesting open technologies that are starting to be developed that potentially could let you do a lot of very interesting things with connecting up different websites together and not having to start over from scratch on every site that you go to. And the real question, I think, back then was, where is this all going? Which of these technologies are complementary or competitive, and who's going to actually use them, and what are users going to have to learn? What are technologists going to have to learn? And the picture I sort of floated was that I said, I think what's going to happen is there's going to become a set of kind of service providers in the middle that act on behalf of the user out to all the websites across the web that want to be social. And there'll be sites that want to act as your identity provider, so I've already got an account. And they said there would be sites that would want to act as your social graph provider. So, I've already got an address book or a friends list. I don't want to have to recreate that everywhere I go. And that there would be sites that would act as content aggregators that would be able to let you see the activity from you and your friends all over the web. And that these would create kind of a symbiotic ecosystem that made it a lot easier for new sites to come up and be social and let users come and find those sites. And then in particular, this would enable a kind of a virtuous cycle where if it's really easy for me to go check out some new site because I don't have to sign up and put in a new password and fill out a new profile and upload a photo and all that stuff, and if it's really easy to bring in my existing social graph and find out who I know on that site, maybe it's a niche site that not everyone I know is going to be interested in, but a few people are, then I can start to have an experience there right away, and it lowers that barrier to trying something new. And if then when I do create some activity there, I make a review or I author some content or what have you, if that can flow back out into my aggregator, and all my other friends who aren't part of that site can see it, they not only learn about what I'm doing, but they learn about the site. And if they can then go and do it themselves, you can see there's this really nice virtuous cycle, at least in theory, that should allow lots of new websites to grow and quickly flourish by reducing a lot of friction all around. And then later that year, it became clear that while each of those individual pieces was useful, there was something really magical about putting them all together. And that this sort of being both the way that I can go to a new website and bring my identity and my contacts and pull information back, that there was sort of a whole that was more than the sum of its parts. And that was also reflected in the technology. There were all these independent projects that were started for very different reasons, but all sort of started to come together into what we sort of loosely called the open stack. And that was a term that sort of, people seem to latch onto, because it's like, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff here where it's not individual companies just with platforms. It's really a set of technologies. It's kind of like a set of protocols like the web itself that was going to allow all this creativity to happen in the social dimension. And so, it's interesting to go back and say, well, okay, that was last year. What's happened since then? And I'm sure if you guys have been paying attention at all, you've seen there's just a flurry. Yahoo's whole YOS strategy is completely based on this. Windows Live is now a sort of aggregator and take your information around. Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, AOL, the list goes on, all being Open ID providers for all of their users. And on and on. And then Facebook, right? Facebook Connect, very much the same model. Not exactly the same technology under the hood, but exactly the same concepts. MySpace, same thing. MySpace ID, like Facebook Connect, but in fact all the open stack under the hood. And then most recently, Facebook getting involved in Open ID as well, so even bringing the open stack around to everybody. So just a real flurry of activity. Google supporting portable contacts recently too. And of course, Friend Connect being this thing that allows you to take that information out to any website and immediately drop it in. So the little guys actually have an advantage over the big guys a lot of time. And as that was all happening, all of these trends were just having great success. So this is, JanRain tracks the number of unique relying parties, so sites you can go use in OpenID, and it just continues to go up and up and up. There's a wiki that tries to keep track of all the different sites that have OAuth-enabled APIs, so ways to access your private data without having to give away your password in a standard way. And as you can see, I can't even fit the list on the screen anymore. This is a snapshot of some of the feeds that you can share into Plaxo Pulse. It's one of the first web-wide aggregators. And again, not only is the number of places that have feeds really expanded, but the number of really mainstream sites. You can get your Netflix reviews. You can get the stories you think are interesting on the New York Times. There's all this sort of stuff that you can do that is really interesting to real mainstream users, as well as all the sort of early Web 2.0 stuff that pioneered this. And OpenSocial. I mean, what a radical concept. OpenSocial only started publicly, a few months before last year's Google I/O talk. And not only did they get all of these different big sites as a community to come together and say, yes, let's have a standard platform for building these social applications. Let's not, have the browser wars, but worse. It's now deployed on enough sites that, collectively speaking, it's hitting hundreds and hundreds of millions of users. So again, very mainstream adoption in a very short period of time of these new technologies. Just, to me, really extraordinary to watch that pace of innovation. So when I take that all together, it seems very clear to me, and I hope it's clear to you, that the whole web is going social, and that the social web is going open. And that's a pretty fundamental transformation. In fact, a lot of people, I think, feel that it's as fundamental as the birth of the web itself, where you had this sort of new paradigm, this new ecosystem that was going to foster just an absolutely rapid amount of innovation because the protocols themselves were fundamentally open to anybody with a good idea to come in and play. And so there's a lot of things you can now do to take advantage of that. And so I want to show you throughout most of this talk is all the things you can actually go do today and that people are doing to start to live in this new social ecosystem. Because even though this has been happening so rapidly, or maybe because it's been happening so rapidly, I think a lot of people haven't really woken up to just how much of this stuff is actually real, how much of it is actually suitable for mainstream users, and how powerful it can be for your applications. And so 4 things I wanted to sort of focus on as areas that can add value to your services right now. One is how to streamline your sign-up flow, so how to make it easy for new people to come and find out your app without having to create yet another account, another password, another profile photo, on and on and on. Putting an end to what we call refriend madness, which is not having to refriend the same person everywhere you go. So you can say, yes, I've already made friends here. Let me use that existing friends list on this new site. Getting rid of the password anti-pattern, which is where sites ask you for your password to another service in order to access data on your behalf. Right? And that's obviously sort of scary from a security and privacy perspective, and scraping is also, technically speaking, kind of ugly and breaks a lot. But until there were good, robust APIs and standards, there often wasn't an alternative for doing real deep integrations. And so now we're finally getting to the point where the safe and secure way is actually better than the insecure way. And then finally, what I call riding that virtuous cycle of social discovery. So being able to actually have your app go through that loop where more people can discover it and share it with their friends, and they can come find it, and so forth. And so I thought rather than just talking, I would try to show you as many demos of this in the wild as I could, and then sort of talk through what's actually going on under the hood. So you'll get a sense of sort of what this really means, and hopefully be fodder for some more detailed Q&A. And I invite you to go as high-level or low-level technical as you like. This is what I do for a living, and I love it. So the first thing I thought I would start with is something, and most of these I've demoed at one time or another before. There's nothing that you probably here should see for the first time, but if you're like most people, it's hard enough to keep track of all these things. So hopefully everyone will see something sort of new and interesting here. The first one is an integration that we did with Google using a hybrid of the Open ID and OAuth protocols for an easy way for Google users to sign up for Plaxo. But it would work with anybody that supported these standards. So let me jump over to my trusty web browser. OK, so here I am. I'm Hong, and my friend Joseph has invited me to join Plaxo. This is like any invitation email you get to any social service. But what's interesting, when I click on it to go sign up, God gosh darn it, it's already starting to do this thing, huh? Let me quickly go in and see if I can regenerate this. As I say, live demos are always a little bit masochistic. Let me pull this up. We'll have to also see how flaky the internet is or not. Okay, let me try sending this guy another invite. All right. I think probably I tested this invite before. Okay, so here's a shiny new invite. I've already signed out yet. Okay, so like a normal invite, but because the user came from Gmail, we were able to recognize that, there's a better way to sign up with your Google account, sign up in just a few clicks. And so we're able to give the person a custom landing page. And if the user wants to, they can go through our normal sign-up flow. But if they click the sign up with my Google account button, we actually take them over to Google, and we say, hey, we'd like some information from you to get started. And the cool thing is, we were able to tell that they're a Google user because they got invited to a gmail.com address, and they're actually already logged into Google because they just came from Gmail, right? So it's a very smooth experience. And you can see it says, Plaxo is asking for some information about this user. They'd like your name and email address, the language you speak, and access to your address book. And with one click, I can say, OK, sounds good. You're now taken back to Plaxo, and behind the scenes, we create an account for you that's tied to your Google account. So there's no need for you to create a Plaxo-specific password. And as long as you're signed into Google, you'll be able to stay signed into Plaxo. And so the first thing I can do when I get into the app, rather than having yet another sign-up form, is I can just answer that invitation. So I can say, in Plaxo, you can connect to people separately as family, friend, and business and share different things with those different people. So in this case, I'm going to be his friend. And then normally the next step we would take you to is, well, let's import your address book. Do you use Google, Yahoo, the standard thing you've seen a zillion times. But here, because, again, we know that they're Google, and they already gave us access to their address book on that previous step, we can just immediately say, OK, well, gee, let's go see which of your Google friends use Plaxo here. And so we can pull in their address book and match it up against the list of Plaxo users. And, again, the next thing that they actually see that they can do is, here's a bunch of people that you know that you can start to connect with. Right? So just a very quick interface. I'm not typing anything. I'm just clicking through, and I'm immediately doing what I want to do, which is starting to use the app. So, and, this goes on through. And I guess the last thing to sort of show you that's sort of cool about this, the standard kind of, connect, invite, et cetera, connect to friends of friends, et cetera, and, get some basic extra information. And when we land, the person gets landed in the app, we show them this little thing that says, hey, next time you come back to Plaxo, you can just click sign in with a Google account, and you won't have to type in a Plaxo password. It'll just remember, if you're not signed into Google currently, it'll make you sign in. But if you are signed into Google, it'll just be magic. And in fact, if you come back to Plaxo and you're already signed into Gmail, you just will be signed in. So, any site will tell you that not only is getting users to sign up and get through that whole sign-up process, you get a lot of drop-off and a lot of friction there, but lost passwords are a huge problem for any consumer service. You haven't logged in a while and you don't remember what your password is. Well, we get rid of all of that because, you're always going to be signed into Gmail if you're a Gmail user. So that's a good example, and this is something that we went live with just a couple of months ago. And so under the hood, again, so what's happening is because it's been sent to a gmail.com address, we realize, oh, OK, that's a Google user. That's likely to be someone who could log in with a Google Open ID. And when we send them over, one of the things you can do when you're asking for somebody to log in with Open ID, which, again, if you're not familiar with that basic concept, it's like, I've already got an account over on Google. I just want to have Google, prove to Plaxo that, yes, this really is that user, and then it can trust that, OK, well, in that case, I'll make an account based on that credential. It's just, in this case, my sort of Google URL, as you will, my own user URL. But you can ask for additional data to come across with that transaction. So instead of just saying, yes, this really is Joseph at Gmail, it can also say, and by the way, could you give me some basic profile data? And in this case, also, hey, could you give me an OAuth token to access their address book? So OAuth by itself is this nice protocol where, similarly, you can sort of bounce the person over to a site and say, hey, could you give this person access to some of your data, but you don't have to give away your password. You don't have to give away all of the rights to your data. You can just give away a piece, like maybe they can access my address book but not my calendar, or they can read to it but not write to it. And so I can ask for that OAuth token as part of the OpenID round trip. That's the so-called hybrid piece of it, because it's sort of combining them together into one step. And so the nice thing is that the user then literally just has to push that one button, and all of a sudden we get the fact that they're a Google user, we get the verified email address, so no need to send them that email and say, hey, could you click on this and prove you really are, because obviously Google is the authority for gmail.com, so if they tell us that's the right user, we have to trust them. And we get the address book to be able to start doing the import. So really just cutting friction down. And like I said, portable contacts is the standard way of using OAuth to get access to address book data, which Google also supports. And so what's neat about this is we actually didn't write a line of Google-specific code to do this. It's just that Google was first out with all of this implementation on their side. So that's how it works. Now, you could ask the question, of course, so is this actually something that moves the needle on a consumer service? Well, we actually, we're a very empirical company, like I'm sure most startups these days have to be. And so we see that when given the choice to sign up with your Google account versus signing up with a regular account, people choose that predominantly. And the completion rate of saying, yes, I'm going to sign up with a Google account versus abandoning if you just show the person the normal sign-up form is considerably lower. So it starts out better, but then it really gets going. So of the users we send off to Google, there's always this worry that you're going to send them off to some other website and they'll never come back. Well, because you're already signed into Google, you've been conditioned by the landing page to understand you're going to go sign into Google, so you're not jarred by it. It's a friendly page. It shows the little Plaxo and Google logos together. It says what you're giving out. Like, it's not scary. It's very sensible. So a whopping 92% of people that we send off click and come back. That's an astoundingly high figure. I mean, getting 92% of people to follow anything, even on your site, is hard, right? And so what that means is that far from this becoming the chasm of death where you lose the person, we actually get people to come back in droves, and then, of course, they import much more successfully because we don't have to ask them for a password or remember what service they used or all that kind of stuff. The contacts just come over. And so as a result, because they've got more data and they're less fatigued, they end up doing a lot more connection and invitation and filling out data and all that good stuff you want your users to do than a comparable user who came through the normal flow. So it just moves all of the metrics across. And the cool thing is that they even come back more often. Because even though they have to do this sign in with your Google account, which is a little bit different than what they're used to, they're just signed in most of the time because they're already signed into Google. Or if they're not, they definitely remember their Google password, even if they don't remember their Plaxo one normally, right? So we actually get better return visits as well. And so the funny thing is, we originally did this as an experiment just to kind of test how far we'd come along. And once we saw how good the results are, the business guys at Plaxo wouldn't let us shut the experiment down. Because they were like, no. We're like, well, we want to try some different things. And like, this is great. So it's actually now 100% of people who get invited to @gmail.com addresses now go through this flow, and it's doing great things for us, and the users love it, and Google uses it, right? Loves it because we're not scraping them, we're not being insecure, and the Google user now gets more value out of having a good Google account, a good address book up to date. So that's a good kind of concrete example of how this interoperability, based on these open standards, can really be effective and also be really user-friendly, as opposed to some of the, if you've played with it maybe a year ago, a lot of it was still sort of geeky and confusing, but with this number of mainstream companies really working on it now, the user experience is something that's very rapidly improving. Okay, so that's, and then the thing that's, like I alluded to earlier, that's extra cool is, because this is all based on open standards, and this was not a Plaxo Google cabal, anybody else who supports this, it works. So MySpace also supports the hybrid OpenID, OAuth login, and portable contacts. And so I literally took this code and pointed it at MySpace once they told me that it was ready, and it just worked the first time. And that's pretty miraculous when you think about it, right? It's the idea that the marginal cost of implementing with a new site could be that small means we're much more likely to work with a lot more sites and a lot smaller sites, because that barrier of is the bang for the buck of integrating specifically with a big site like MySpace or a small, more niche site, it completely changes that equation. And Plaxo is not the only one doing this now. So Friendfeed is another sort of real-time aggregation kind of service. And if you go to their homepage now, you'll see that they have these sign up and find your friends with one click. Technically it's 2 clicks. So we call it 2-click sign up. They call it 1-click sign up. It's a marketing thing, I guess. But with Facebook and with Google and Twitter. So what's nice is that other people are playing both sides of the roles, right? MySpace and Google swap out, or Plaxo and Friendfeed, and Friendfeed could do MySpace too. So it all works out of the box. And then I guess the one more thing there is, if you saw last week, Facebook's now doing this too. So Facebook started testing OpenID support on Facebook, where, among other things, they work with this Google flow. So you can sign up for a Facebook account really easily, and then you'll stay logged into Facebook if you're logged into your Google account. So really impressive to see how mainstream this is becoming, and it's just unequivocally good for everybody. It's a classic case of just removing inefficiency from the system, and everybody wins. And so I thought to sort of pair with this, I'd show you a MySpace version of it too, so you can start to see the pattern here. And like I say, if you have questions as you come along, or I know I talk a little bit fast, I get kind of excited about what I'm saying, so please feel free to jump in at any time. Okay, so here's a little demo site called 8-Bit Music. And the idea is, it's a niche social site for people who really like the video game soundtracks, the little like MIDI, do, that kind of stuff, right? And so it's the kind of site that won't appeal to everyone, but there's a loyal subset of people that would think this is really cool. But it's exactly the kind of site where it's like, oh man, I got to sign up for yet another account and fill out yet another profile and find all my friends. It might be hard for a site like that to thrive in a world where everybody had to do all that from scratch. But instead, they've got this nice login with MySpace button. And so it just pops up again. They do it with a pop-up, so not even taking you away from the page. This sort of very friendly thing. And if I weren't signed into MySpace, it would ask me for my login and password, but it's a myspace.com URL, so 8-Bit Music never sees my password. And in this case, I'm already logged in, so it's just as easy to say, yes, this is me. And you can see it's got that same friendly UI where it's got the 8-Bit Music logo and the MySpace logo, so I can see what's going on. And as soon as I continue, then again, they get it's hybrid OpenID and OAuth, and so boom, I'm in the site. Here's my name, here's my photo, here's all my information, and I can start to find people and share things, right? So it's just really, really easy to start doing this, and that really increases the chances for small sites like this to grow and thrive. And that's 8bitmusic.jdavid.net if you want to play with that demo yourself. I should mention all of these slides. I think Google I/O is going to put them up, but I'll also have them up on my website, which is josephsmarr.com. And so I'll put it up when this talk is over so you guys can get a copy that way. And I'm also JSmarr on Twitter if you want to tweet out or follow or whatever. It should be easy to get a hold of me. OK, so that was about how do you streamline the sign-up process. And that's very important. But there's still the problem of, now do I want to, I can import my address book, but am I still friending each person again on each site? And it's obviously the case that you don't necessarily want everyone you know to follow you around on every site you go to, right? Like I have different spheres of my life, everybody else does too. And it's partly a privacy thing, but it's also partly just a signal and noise thing, right? I don't want to bug all of my colleagues that I normally talk about OpenID stuff with my personal hobbies that they may not be interested in. And so you'd basically like to be able to have a situation where you can say, in some cases, if it's a friendly site, maybe I want to say, well, gee, if we're already friends on Facebook, why don't we just have that be a transitive thing? We can be friends here as well. And in other cases, be able to just pick a subset. And until recently, it really hasn't been possible. But we did a pretty substantial integration with Facebook Connect recently, where I think we started to sort of change that a little bit. So let's go back to, let's see here. Let's go back to that site. Here I am, and I just joined with this account that I created for my Google onboarding. So now let me go into my Facebook, and I'll say, OK, maybe I can connect with Facebook. And I said, let me not only see which of my friends use, but I can share content back and forth between the two sites. And so again, nice little pop-up. In this case, you can see it's not even a pop-up. It's a little Ajax lightbox because Facebook is using, we've got some Facebook JavaScript on my page, and they've got a little hidden iframe over to their site, and so they can tell I'm currently logged into Facebook. And so there's no need to actually pop up a physical pop-up with a separate domain because they're not taking any credentials. And so it can be an even more streamlined experience. So it's interesting, the full page to the pop-up to now the inline. And again, same thing, right? I hope you're getting a pattern here. Plaxo and Facebook, do you want to share information, yes or no? So it's a pattern I think that users are going to be able to learn and apply across different websites. And so when I connect, now Plaxo says, OK, so now you tell me how you want to use your Plaxo and Facebook accounts together, because some people want it differently. So the first one says, automatically connect with my Facebook friends who also use Plaxo. So that's the case of saying, hey, if we're already friends on Plaxo, or if we're already friends on Facebook, and we both have connected our Facebook and Plaxo accounts, don't make us reconnect. Let's just, that's good enough. We already said we were friends. And if you don't like that, don't choose it. But a lot of people find that to be very convenient. And then it says, and do you want to share things back and forth between the two sites? And so when you go to do that, because it's a deeper level of integration, Facebook says, well, let me make sure the user really wants this. So they ask for a couple of extra permissions. And this is a nice sort of model where rather than having to give the user 10 checkboxes up front, you sort of wait for the user to interact with the app, and as necessary, you can escalate the amount of control that they have so that it's really easy to get started, but you don't end up sort of giving away the farm too early. So this first says, make sure, is it OK if Plaxo knows who I am, not just for now, but ongoing, so that they can, sync things in the background and what have you. OK, sure. And then the second one says, is it OK if you can take the things that you're sharing in Facebook and also share that with my friends over on Plaxo? And you can see, again, sort of very nice visual representation. This is actually, this says getting ready to demo at Google I/O. You can't see it, but it's, it's the real data that I've had. So it's kind of, very easy for me to tell what I'm getting myself into. And so when I allow that, then it goes, OK, so the permissions have been saved. And so here, let me go and set this all up together and wait for the internet, which has been pretty cooperative, but not the fastest. Wait for it. Yay. So now my settings have been saved. And if I go back to my homepage now, skip the opportunity to expand my network since I just did, you'll see that now I've not only connected my Facebook account, but you can see I'm now connected to 4 more people. And so these were all people who were my friends over on Facebook. And apologize for the names. These are all sort of test accounts. But conceptually, right, these are 4 of my Facebook friends who I may not even have realized were on Plaxo. But because we all connected our accounts like this, now we're friends on Plaxo too. And I didn't have to go to the work of bugging them each time, hey, do you want to also be friends on Plaxo? Because they all said, yes, I'm cool with that. And so again, the result is I start to get content here. So here's a friend, Anita, shared some photos on Facebook, and they're coming across, and I'm seeing them in Plaxo. And here's a video that they shared, and I can play it. And if I want to watch it, it takes me right over to Facebook. So it's a very nice, tight interaction between the two. Yeah. The question is the content replicated to each site? The raw content's not. So you can see here I'm actually over on Facebook. So it's more like sort of the feed of the information comes across. And then, but we watch it every so often. So if it changes, we can change it on our side as well. So if you decide to make something private, then it goes away everywhere else. But it allows you to see it even where you're not there. So anyway, so that's another example of how, again, any website not only has a hard time getting users to start signing up, they have an even harder time getting to build out a rich social graph. And this makes it a lot easier. And you may have seen, since this went live, it also went, Dig did a somewhat similar integration where you sort of automatically follow all of the subset of your Facebook users who are also Dig users. And so that to me is a really cool example because I always used to tell people, isn't it weird that here I am in the middle of Silicon Valley and everyone I know uses Dig, but I have like 3 friends on Dig, and so I don't see what any of those people are digging because it's just too much work to like go through and build yet another curated friends list just on Dig, right? But if it can happen automatically through a site like Facebook that I've already done and built up a set of social graph, now it's actually a much richer experience when I go to Dig. It's not just kind of what random 13-year-olds across the world thought was a cool story. It's like what the people I actually know and care about thought was a cool story, which is a much more interesting filtered view. And so that whole being able to lower the friction of getting that data to move all of a sudden means that you can get a lot more engaging experiences and get your users into a much happier state without having to make them do so much work. So that's really the payoff here. And so, again, on the back end, this really wasn't too hard to do. So essentially what we have to do is when somebody connects their Facebook account and Plaxo account, we just have a little database table that stores a mapping between their Facebook ID and their Plaxo ID. And then we store the little session key they give us, which is kind of like an OAuth token that allows us to make API calls on the person's behalf. And then we can pull down their friends list, which is essentially just a list of other Facebook IDs. And we can intersect that with our mapping table and see which of the subset of your Facebook friends have also connected their accounts. And that's the set of Plaxo users that we can auto-connect you to. And then we just check the preference to see if both sides said, yes, auto-connect me, and if so, we do. And we also, I didn't show you this, but you get a little notification in Plaxo, if somebody comments on one of your photos or whatever, about each person that you've connected with. So if you decide, oh, gee, I'm friends with that person on Facebook, but I'm not really sure I want to be their friend on Plaxo, you can just go in right there and change it to business instead of friend or get rid of it or whatever. So you're never surprised by what's happening. It's very seamless, and for most people, most of the time, they're pretty cool with keeping the friends list the same. But it allows you to kind of curate it on the fly. And then what we do is we basically have a daemon that runs in the background every whatever it is, few hours, that checks, hey, do you have any new friends on Facebook? Well, let's see if they're Plaxo members. Or have you unfriended anybody on Facebook? Or let me see, or have some of your friends since connected their Plaxo Facebook accounts? And so it just runs in the background and does that algorithm over and over again. And so the cool thing is, as more and more people hook up their accounts, I just get friended to them. And as more and more people join Facebook, I get connected to them. And so the benefit to me as a user, and also the benefit to Plaxo, is not just a one-time thing, like when you do a one-time import. It actually keeps getting better over time. And so you get a marginal return for that one-time investment. And so that's a really powerful model, because especially if you think about new sites that are small, you may come as an early adopter and try to use it and not find a lot of your friends there. But over time, a bunch more people are going to join. And you'd really like that to be able to bring you back to the site and give you more reasons to keep interacting with it. And so now you can. And then Facebook has this OpenStream API, which is another use of Facebook using open standards. They've really gotten on the bandwagon, which is so awesome. So there's another building block, which wasn't even in that OpenStack diagram from last year, called activity streams, which is a sort of a standard way of doing rich metadata around, shared a video or posted a photo or what have you. And so that's a protected feed, but we got the access from the user, that second permission dialog you saw. So we can suck that out and then share it privately with the user's Plaxo friends. And I think what's crucial there is that notice that I didn't have to make the data public just to make it portable, right? So I'm specifically wanting to share non-public things with my friends and family. It's just that some of them are on Facebook and some of them are on Plaxo, and I don't really want to have to make all of my Facebook friends join Plaxo or all of my Plaxo friends join Facebook. I just want to be able to put stuff up and share it to my friends in both places. I just don't want to have to make it public to share it with everybody. And with this sort of secure data portability, you really can do that. And so that's a really powerful thing that, a lot of the success of early Web 2.0 came from just getting around all of these tricky identity and privacy problems by making everything public. But that's not really what most people want when you think about it. And so now you don't have to do that. Okay, and then presumably you've been seeing this all along, but you never saw me type a password in once, right? And that's really cool, especially when you're using a tablet PC, because handwriting recognition for passwords is pretty bad. It doesn't really look like an English word. And so I wanted to show you an example on Friendfeed's side. I think they've done a particularly good job. They've got this, like all these sites, they have a little friend finder. But rather than asking for passwords everywhere, they've got this nice streamlined interface where it just takes you over to the other site and then shows you the people you might want to connect with. So you can see here they've got Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, Yahoo, and Hotmail. And some of these are using open standards and some of them aren't, but to the user it all kind of works the same. And hopefully over time, as more and more people support these open standards, it'll be less and less work for sites like Friendfeed to support, and they'll be able to support more and more additional sites. But conceptually, if I go to, let's do Yahoo this time. So Yahoo makes me log in each time, because they're a little bit more paranoid, probably for good reason. And then they show me a bit of a scarier page, but it's the same thing. It's like, hey, is it okay if Friendfeed has access to your information? But then once I bounce back, it's the same thing. It's OAuth, and boom, you can see how fast it is. Here's a bunch of my Yahoo contacts that I might want to follow on Friendfeed. Now, if instead I decide, let's use Gmail, it's the same thing, right? So it's this very seamless, it's actually a lot nicer than having to type passwords in because I happen to already be logged into those other sites, right? If you're taking passwords, you don't get the value of the person already being logged in, whereas here you do. And they do Facebook as well. And even Facebook has their own, kind of, it's not OAuth, it's their own version, but it's, conceptually very similar, right? Yeah, so the fact that those other sites aren't asking me for passwords is because I happen to already be logged into them. And if I weren't logged in, I would have to log in, but at least I'm giving my password only to the sites that have my data, and I'm never giving a password to Friendfeed in either case. Right? Does that make sense? So that's a lot more secure for me because if I don't trust Friendfeed, then I can always say they can't have access later, and I don't have to go change my password, and Friendfeed can't go and do anything other than read my address book. They can't go in and delete my account or whatever, which any site you give your password to theoretically could, so you really have to trust them. So this is a cool example. I just want you to see also that it's not just Plaxo. Like, we've obviously been very eager early adopters and evangelists of a lot of these open standards because our service is all about helping you stay in touch with people across all the different services you use. But lots and lots of other sites are starting to use these technologies and having great success with them. And I think Friendfeed's implementation here is fantastic. And so behind the scenes, one of the things that's helping a lot here is that even though a lot of these sites standardized on OAuth for being able to give access to data without your password, they still all had their own contacts API. So Google had GData contacts, and Yahoo had the Yahoo address book API, and Microsoft has Windows Live contacts and whatever. And so even though you could just use the code once to get access to the data, you still had to write separate site-specific code. And really, to have the kind of virtuous cycle we're talking about, you really want to have the protocols themselves be open standards so that you can talk to someone you've never heard of before, right? So if you're a small site, you don't want to have to convince Friendfeed to add an importer for your site. You just want the user to be able to say, hey, I'm on this small site, but we speak the same standard, so it just works. And so Portable Contacts is a standard that does that, and it's basically just a very simple RESTful API. You can learn more at portablecontacts.net. And it exposes, it's basically vCard data, but exposed in a more modern way, sort of JSON or XML, so that it's very easy to go get access to that data, and it's in a standard format. And what's cool is, in addition to just traditional webmail address book providers, we got together with the OpenSocial community, and we standardized so that OpenSocial, which has a much richer set of requirements around building social applications into websites and so forth, but they have a bunch of externally facing APIs, one of which is, get my profile data or get my friends' data, which is very much the same. And so we were able to work together and wire align Portable Contacts and the OpenSocial piece about getting people. So any OpenSocial provider out of the box is also a Portable Contacts provider. So if you wanted to do import from MySpace or High5 or Friendster or Orchid or any of these sites that support OpenSocial, you can do it the same way as you can from your Gmail contacts. So that's very cool to see that convergence happening. And it's all because we got together and said, hey, we believe that we can grow the pie substantially for everyone if we can stop bickering over the little details of how you describe a phone number and focus on building value higher up in the stack. And that's what allowed this to move. And a cool thing, there's a guy, Sean Sullivan, who just found out about Portable Contacts out in the community and whipped up an Android app. And now you guys all have your own Android phones. Maybe you can do this too. It's called JayPoco. And again, so you could import from any Portable Contacts provider into your Android phone. So he's doing it with Plaxo. And all of a sudden, boom, you've got all my information there, right? So it's neat how people come up. We didn't even really anticipate this use case when we thought about Portable Contacts. But because it's a standard, it's so easy for people to go off and build this stuff, and anybody can go use it. And so the last thing I would want to say is, so now you're into the site. Now you've got your friends list. But what you really want to complete that virtuous cycle is when you're making activity or sharing things on that site, you want it to flow back out into your aggregator of choice, whether that's Plaxo or Friendfeed or Facebook or Twitter or Windows Live or Yahoo Updates. I mean, pretty much all the major players have these now. And so you'd like the user to be able to say, just like, well, wherever you keep your contacts, bring them in. Wherever you aggregate your activity, send it back out, because that's how other people are going to find out what's going on and come find out about your site. And so I think one of the coolest implementations here is something that Google made called Friend Connect. And Friend Connect does a lot of cool things, but what it does is it lets any website add social functionality by just copying and pasting a few lines of JavaScript. So sort of like how in AdWords you can just easily put ads on your site, with Friend Connect you can easily put social information on your site. And Google hosts all the data so that you don't have to do any back-end programming. You just have to, here, let me make sure I'm still signed in properly and everything. So this is a little site called My Latest Piece. This is like a local artist that wants to share off his stuff. And a typical example of where traditionally you'd have just kind of a standard website that doesn't really have its own programmers or ability to build a bunch of social information and all that kind of stuff. But with Friend Connect, they just drop in this widget. And so I've signed in here. And let's see, maybe I'll show you the interface. So let me sign out. And you can see these are little iframes, and so it's just easy for me to say, join this site. And then under the hood, Google's powering this pop-up, so they get this OpenID sign-in experience. So I'll use my Google account. So again, I don't have to create a separate account on let me do a different user. On my latest piece, I can use my Google account. And then I can also go, and now I'm in the site, and I can see which of my friends are on this site. So that same cool experience I showed you, but with even less work than it would have taken to build it yourself. And if I go and look at my settings, what's really cool is not only can I get into the site, I can then hook up the other tools and services that I use. So I can pull in Twitter, I can pull in LinkedIn, I can pull in Plaxo, and have that information on the site. And again, Google's done all the hard work behind the scenes, and so the site can just sort of take advantage of having richer profile data and more connections. But crucially down here, what you can see is this option, publish my activities to the sites I've joined and out to my networks. And so what that means is if I share activity on this site, it'll go back into my Plaxo stream. So for example, if I say, going down here and say, great piece, hi from Google I/O. And now you'll know that I couldn't have faked it because it's, I wouldn't have known that I was going to be giving a talk here. It's a theory, right? All right. You win some, you lose some. There we go. Okay, and then I'll post that rating. And so then my rating will show up down here. And then my rating will show up down here. Let me refresh that. If we were using Wave, you would have seen it like character by character. Oh yeah, so hi, great piece from Google I/O. So that's cool. So people on that site can see that it's me and they can see my real photo. But then what's really cool is I can go back to Plaxo and let me sign back in as my account that I was using. And there it is. Joseph posted on a Friend Connect site. Joseph wrote a review. Hi, from Google I/O, and it's on My Latest Piece. And so other my friends will see this. They may never have heard of My Latest Piece, right? But they can not only see that I did this thing, they can just click through and see it over there, right? And then they can come in and join their account. And so that's that virtuous cycle that I was talking about. And the thing to me that's so cool about this is not only does it allow me to use lots of different websites and share activity, but Plaxo's never heard of My Latest Piece, right? It's not like we wrote a special plugin to interface with mylatestpiece.com. We'd never heard of them. But because it's using open standards, it just works. And it's using the OpenSocial RESTful APIs with OAuth, all this same stuff you keep hearing about, and that's what makes it work. And what's even cooler then is that because it's all open standards, Google can go make a service like Friend Connect where anybody could implement this themselves, or you can outsource it to somebody like Google, and it all just sort of works. So that that's only possible in a world where you have these open standards. And this is really fertile ground that most people are still not taking advantage of this stuff, and is just going to be killer for all of your sites. You're going to wonder, I think, within a year, how people possibly thought that it was reasonable to put out a new startup. And it's like, all right, now we just have to get 10 million people to sign up and upload photos and connect to 100 friends and share a bunch of activity and come back to the site daily and we'll be set. Like, that's such a high bar when you think about it, right? It's just so hard to do that on a bunch of different sites. And now you don't have to. And so I think that the real benefit will be all the smaller developers who can just build these sites that can kind of grow and thrive, much the way you can link to lots of different websites. And a small website can be linked to just as easily as a big one, and then it can start to rise in relevance, except now the data is moving with it as well. And so I mentioned Facebook a few times. You know, a year ago, I think there was a big question mark. In fact, when I gave that talk where I mentioned I didn't show you the full slide, there was the OpenStack piece, and then we sort of said, well, Facebook, you know, they're not really doing any of this OpenStack stuff, although to be fair, their own stuff, Facebook Connect and the Facebook platform, you know, it's conceptually very similar, right? It's still me taking my account to another site, bringing my friends, sharing activity back. And so it certainly is sort of a similar worldview that you'd want to consider. It was just sort of annoying to have to say, well, gee, I got to build it twice, once for the OpenStack and once for Facebook. But then a funny thing happened over the past year. You know, Facebook decided, gee, it's time to open up our stream, which many thought was the most closely guarded piece of data on Facebook. But they said, no, we're going to open it up to developers, and what's more, we're going to do it in an open standard way with activity streams. And then they joined the OpenID Foundation. And, you know, then they decided, well, gee, we're not just going to join the OpenID Foundation, we're going to roll out OpenID ourselves. And then not a month later, the big one, boom, Facebook actually supports OpenID as a relying party and does the OpenID and OAuth and portable contacts all rolled into one. And so they are very much in the game now, and that's really exciting because obviously, you know, Facebook is a huge site and very innovative, and they've got a lot of users and a lot of data. And so you as a site, obviously, are going to want people who are on Facebook to come and use it. Now, it's certainly the case that Facebook's not everything on the web, right? In fact, if you look at stats of these sites that allow you to log in from lots of different places, what's very interesting is, A, the pie chart has a lot of big wedges. So, you know, there's a lot of Facebook users, sure, but there's also a lot of MySpace users, a lot of Google users, a lot of Yahoo users, what have you. And the other thing that's interesting is that the relative sizes of the wedges change a lot based on the type of site that you're going to. So I believe on SnoopDog.com, you know, which accepts OpenID logins, think about that for a second, using Jan Rain's RPX, then the, you know, MySpace is more predominant, but on, you know, user voice, Google's more predominant, and on other sites, you know, Yahoo's more predominant, and especially internationally, it's very different. And so when you think about that, you know, you as a developer, especially you as an individual site owner, you really have no loyalty per se to one site or the other. You just want your users to be able to come in and use whatever data they already have. You don't want to be in the business of having to say, you know, you can play here, but you can't. And so what you really want is to be able to just write it once and have it work across all these websites. And so it's very exciting to see more and more companies converge around this. And then, you know, and there's a whole ecosystem building around this. So, you know, what I showed you all these feeds coming in, right? Well, Plaxo, you know, we were one of the first to do this. We had to build it all ourselves. So we had custom agents and pollers and crawlers. But now there are these great startups out there like GNIP, if you haven't heard of them. They go out and they figure out how to get feeds from all these different websites, and then they just push it to you in real time, and they do all the scalability stuff. So we use them for a bunch of our feeds where we say, like, you know, anytime somebody publishes on Delicious, we know however many, you know, Delicious users are also connected into Plaxo, and they just ping us with, oh, hey, you know, Smarr just saved another bookmark, and so it shows up like within a minute in our site, and it doesn't require us to have loads. So, you know, another benefit of these standards is that it allows for, kind of like Google Friend Connect, right? It allows for people to come in and add value into the ecosystem, even though they aren't themselves, you know, end destination. So very exciting to see how this is all very frothy. So just to wrap up, and then we'll have some time for questions. As I said at the beginning, I hope I've shown you that the web is going social and the social web is going open. And in fact, I think I can now say it even more strongly than that. I think that the web is actually now social and the social web is now open. And that means it is now time for you guys to actually get involved, since the only thing waiting now is a bunch more developers who get it, who want to push the envelope and make great sites that are easy to use. So in conclusion, you know, it's time to start opening your sites up to users that already have accounts. You know, you're not the first website that they're ever used, and, you know, you should start to take advantage of that. Give them a socially tailored experience. Don't make them start over from scratch with their friends list. And then think about how you can let your users syndicate activity back out into their stream and let you ride that virtuous cycle, because it's going to be a great ride. Thanks a lot. And one last comment. If you want to stay up more to date with what's going on, I know this is a very fast-moving field. One thing we've tried to do to help is a few of us, David Ricordan and Chris Messina and John McRae and I, we do a sort of weekly video podcast called thesocialweb.tv, just sort of quick kind of 10 to 20-minute chunks of the latest news and trying to understand what's going on and help make sense of it in a way that's, you know, not too technical, but helps bring things out. And we often have guests from the people that are building things. So in addition to, you know, following me on Twitter or looking at my blog, this I think you'll find probably a useful resource. So I encourage you to check that out. Yeah.
Thank you for the Thank you for the good presentation. I appreciate the excellent input. Quick question. In terms of management, is there a tool that provides an integrated view over all those sites so that I don't have to go into each container and manage it separately?
So the question is, how do you manage all it? Well, certainly, in part, that's what services like Plaxo are trying to do. They're trying to give you a single place to go to see what the friends you care about are sharing all across the web. So if I have Flickr friends, I can see their photos. If I have Picasa people, they can see their photos. I think there's a lot more work to be done above and beyond that in terms of managing permissions and sharing and notifications and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I think that's going to be another fruitful area of innovation. So I think as more people, when I think of questions like this, I always think of the famous William Gibson quote, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So there are people like me who already have that pain in spades. There's still a lot of other people who really aren't using that many of these tools yet. But I think as more and more people find it easier to get into more and more of these sites, tools that help you manage all that are become more and more important. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for innovation. Yeah.
I saw on Plaxo that you guys still have the either Facebook, Gmail, Google, and even having your own sign-up registration system. Would you advise websites to actually just do Facebook and Google and not have their own registration system anymore?
Yeah, so good question. Is it time to get rid of my own registration system yet? Well, so a lot of sites that already have native users, like we have a bunch of users that already signed up for Plaxo before this stuff came out. We have to have some way for them to log in with their existing credentials. For new sites, I think there are sites that have already gone that route. There's a cool site for discussing technical material called Stack Overflow, and they're 100% OpenID. And there was a cool social bookmarking site called Magnolia that went 100% OpenID. And I think Plaxo, we'd like to get to be a 100% relying party as well, so that basically there'd be no new Plaxo registrations at already existing sites. I think depending on exactly what your audience is, you have to ask yourself, it's pretty true that probably pretty much everyone has an OpenID right now because all the bigger portal providers have it. But if you think, well, gee, maybe my users are particularly non-technical and not likely to have those, you might decide to build your own one. But I think it's definitely getting close to the point where a lot of people could just get rid of it altogether and just say, hey, go sign up for a Google account if you don't have one. And the other advantage there is, there's a lot of stuff you have to do around managing account creation, right? People try to create spammy fake accounts and all of that. And Google and Yahoo and all those sites have way more detailed paranoid teams figuring out how to track and trace that stuff. And so the advantage of outsourcing authentication to someone who is going to do a better job than you and they're going to keep the passwords more secure and all of that, it's not just not having to write the code, it's you actually get a more secure experience at the end. So I think that's another benefit. Yeah.
Well, looking the other way, you have many people who have IDs on multiple sites that were not OpenID originally. Mm-hmm. Is there some way they can coordinate those so that their accounts can be linked retroactively?
Yes, there is. I'm glad you asked that. It's a good point, right? I have lots of URLs of my profiles around the web. They're not all OpenIDs. And even if they were, it would be kind of annoying to have to connect each one individually. And so there's a way you can do this much more easily. One of the things that people figured out a while ago was that you could embed semantic information into the structure of links on the web themselves, something called microformats. So you could put in, if I have my website with contact info or things like that, we just have sort of a simple agreed-upon set of CSS classes that a computer parser could come in and grab data. And one of those was if I'm hyperlinking from one of my profile pages to another profile page, I can put rel equals me in the A tag, and that says this is another profile page about me. And then you can follow those rel equals me links. And the idea is, so if I can say I use my Google profile as an OpenID, and then it has rel equals me links to my other profiles, I probably couldn't have spoofed that without being able to control that Google account. And because I control that Google account, I can prove that with OpenID, you can kind of trust by transitivity that those other sites are mine as well. And then you can follow those links downstream and so forth, and you can actually kind of build a whole set of identifiers about me. And we use this at Plaxo. I didn't put this in this demo, but maybe I should have. Google, again, has come and made this even easier. They have this thing called the Social Graph API, where they basically said, gee, crawling the web is kind of hard, but we've already done that, and we've got it sitting over here on a hard drive, as I understand it. And so why don't we just serve up all those me links in a simple API? So if you look for the Google Social Graph API, you can literally put in any URL and say, give me all the downstream rel equals me links, and they'll give you all back at one shot. And so we do this when every time somebody either signs up with an OpenID or say they hook up their Twitter feed. Twitter, a lot of these sites put these rel equals me links in there for you, so you don't have to be a hacker to do it yourself. LinkedIn, a bunch of these sites do that. We then follow all those links, and those are all ways we know the user. And if they're mapped to services we know, like we know what a Flickr URL looks like, we know what a Twitter URL looks like, we can use to say, hey, looks like you're a Flickr user too, why don't you hook up that feed? And so you get even more downstream benefit and richer profiles. So, and that's a really nice way of sort of using the link structure of the web to get even richer data beyond just the initial OpenID handshake. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for your talk.
Sure.
I just had a question on what you feel browsers could do to help enable all of this. As I see, OpenID integration has been a little difficult because of the whole UI being a pain to deal with.
Right.
So what can browsers do to fix this? Are you aware of any browser projects, Firefox, Opera, whoever?
Yeah. So browsers can be a huge help in this. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing because on the one hand, if you think about it, the browser is in this wonderful privileged position where it actually knows all the different websites that you go to, right? It's a real pain to say, tell me which of these 50 websites you use so that I can provide you a tailored experience, whereas the browser actually knows that. And the browser also presumably has privileged information to your credentials on these websites because it's watched you sign into all of those. So, and the browser could present, secure Chrome that can't be phished and you can't redirect to a fake site and all that kind of stuff, right? And there have been people that have done this. So VeriSign Labs made this plugin called OpenID Seatbelt, and there's a thing called IDIB, Internet Identity in the Browser. There was a project that did that. I think Mozilla also, they showed a video of some sort of OpenID in the browser type stuff. There's a lot of potential there. The downside, of course, is that getting a browser with this upgraded functionality on everybody's desktop is a real deployment challenge. And so I don't think we can wait for browsers to save us. I think there's going to have to be a web-native solution. But I think making it easier for browsers to come in and add additional value on top of that and simplify the UI and be more personalized is an absolute win. And I would love to see things like maybe Google Chrome could do that, right? That's something that's going to be distributed to lots of people that could add that kind of functionality. So definitely great opportunities there, and has been some early work, but it's mainly that deployment challenge is tricky. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier for Facebook Friends, you had a background process that kept the graph up to sync and everything. I was wondering if you do that for any other graph, like MySpace or whatever, and if you're running into scalability problems with that.
Yeah, so scalability of refriending. Well, so our core business traditionally is actually real sync. So we have an Outlook plugin and a Mac plugin and a Thunderbird plugin and that does real continuous background full contact and calendar synchronization. So we sort of already have pretty good infrastructure for that. And the reason we in almost all sites just do a one-time import, which as mentioned is sort of silly because you miss all the downstream stuff, is because when you're taking passwords, it's not only kind of a liability to take the password, it's a real liability to store the password, right? Because if that goes wrong or if you get hacked, you're compromising all the other sites. And so most sites just throw away the password and only do a one-time import. But once you get a long-lived token, whether it's a Facebook token or an OAuth token, you now have the luxury of doing that kind of repeated background import and pulling in the information. And so you can actually get a lot more value than when you just did the one-time thing because you don't have this security problem. So we haven't done as much as we should, to be honest. Like, we don't do it right now with when you do that Google hybrid flow, we just pull them in once, we don't look in the background, but we clearly should. Like, we're being stupid not to do that. And any site should. And it's not really a scalability problem because you can choose how often you want to do that, right? You could do it once a week or once a day or whatever. And in fact, we haven't done this so much with these sites, but in places like in OpenSocial where you have potentially a large number of user accounts that need to be updated with a service, there's ways of sort of batching that. So there's the so-called two-legged OAuth where a service will talk to another service and say, hey, you can trust me that I'm Plaxo because I can prove that I'm Plaxo. And so for these 10 users in batch, could you give me updated information? And then they'll just hand them all over at once rather than doing it one user at a time. So there are tricks like that for scalability above and beyond, but it's really not that bad because it's just a periodic thing in the background. And maybe someday services like GNIP will help me get pushes about my friend notifications as well as feeds. I mean, really, it's kind of the same problem. Yeah.
A question in regards to OpenID and OAuth usage within enterprises as opposed to outside of enterprises. And the second part of the question, integration of those with like Sun's LDAP or Microsoft AD.
Right, great question. So what about inside the enterprise? Actually, it's funny, had a whole panel on this at South by Southwest this year. And enterprises obviously face a lot of these same challenges, and there's a lot of opportunities there. And traditionally, they have been all of these kind of one-off hacky systems. And so I think there's a lot of optimism now that a lot of these technologies can be applied inside the enterprise as well. And there's this, if you don't know about it, there's this thing called the Internet Identity Workshop, which is a kind of unconference where a bunch of people in this field get together and work on these problems. And it's a fantastic thing. We just had one earlier this month. And there was a whole big session, and you had guys from Microsoft who know all the WS Federation and Trust stuff, and you had people from Google, and you had other people, and they're all getting together and kind of figuring out, what is different about the enterprise use cases and how does that work with the stuff, and a lot of very interesting progress being made. There's already some early examples. There's a cool example where Sun.com, they gave all their employees Sun.com open IDs, and the only way you could get one is to be a Sun employee. So you can imagine if Amazon wants to give them an employee discount, you just log in with your Sun account, and all of a sudden it verifies it, right? So there's all kinds of interesting models like that. I think it's still a little bit early there, and there's a few extra levels of paranoia that maybe need to be layered on top as extensions or something, depending on how big the enterprise is and how much they want to revoke and change things or whatever. But it also makes a ton of sense to build. I hope somebody would go build OpenID plugin for something like Active Directory, because that's the point. Is companies have the credentials already of their employees. You'd like to be able to expose that in a way that doesn't require all these consumer like Yammer, poor Yammer, right, wants to build this great kind of like Twitter-like application for enterprises, but they have to go do these one-off, like, let me poke a hole in the firewall and connect to your LDAP, and you dump out and send me, and it's horrible, and it's not core to them, right? So if you could just say, well, you could log in with your OpenID, then it might make it a lot easier.
It just so happens that at PGP, we built a system using an OpenID system using a PGP key.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Because we have this large database on
the
global directory,
yeah,
and people got keys on their machines, and there's code.
Yeah.
And it works.
It's fantastic, well. Yeah. So I really hope.
Actually, so my question is,
yeah.
I understand
You've
Google,
earned a question.
Well, okay. So I understand that Google, wants to provide the authentication, but what if I want to use that to log into Google? I mean, are they willing?
Sure.
You think they're willing to open up to using another OpenID provider?
That's a good question.
You think it's going to level off?
Will the big guys be relying parties too? Well, as Google would say, they actually already are a relying party to thousands of other websites because of their Google Apps for Your Domain project. So if you're a company that wants to host Google Apps for Your Domain, you can use your own login system and get a hosted version of Gmail. Now, it's generally not OpenID on the back end. It's things like SAML, but it's conceptually the same thing. And obviously, I can't speak for any of the big companies, but I think that they all have the same problem. So, I mean, the best example so far is Facebook becoming an OpenID relying party. And if you watch the interview that we did on the Social Web TV with Luke Shepard, who was the main engineer at Facebook who built that, what he says is, just because we're big doesn't mean we don't care about growth. In fact, quite the opposite. And so they have all the same pain with sign-up friction and getting contacts and getting information and having lost passwords. And so they're actually very motivated to make that work. I think the things that are most holding it up are actually more downstream. So, for example, if you want to go download a desktop client or use it on your BlackBerry or mobile phone, what do you do then? And there's good answers that are being worked out, but it's not quite to the point now where they feel like for their user base and their existing deployed apps and all that, they can just switch over. But I do believe it's coming because it really will just drive business value, and you'll be stupid not to do it. It's just a matter of who's going to move first.
So what do you think it's going to take to leverage like the banks, the credit cards, the bill-paying sites to start doing this?
How do you go to sort of higher value transactions?
Yeah.
Well, that is something that a lot of these people think about. And again, a lot of this is making the site more user-friendly, and at the same time, it's actually making it more secure. You're not giving away your password, and there's a lot more kind of cryptography under the hood baked into these OpenID and OAuth. And so, to me, it's sort of this rare scenario where we're actually making the stuff more user-friendly and more secure at the same time. And I think, the higher value transaction people like banks and stuff, they'll probably take a bit of a wait-and-see attitude and see how this plays out in the lower value space and then kind of scale it up. But there's already work being done with extensions about being able to prove that you used a higher level kind of two-factor authentication or things like that. So I think we'll see it. I mean, again, nobody wants this friction, right? If I go check out on an e-commerce site, I don't want to have to put in my credit card over and over and over again if I can pull it in securely. So I think I'll see that. And with 3 seconds left, thank you very much, and go be open and connected.